In today's video, what I wanted to walk you through was one of, if not the hardest bodyweight exercises there is, and that is the pull-up. Many clients I work with have the goal of wanting to be able to do chin-ups, pull-ups, and rep them out all day long. And this is the exact three-step method that we'll use to try and get them there. Anyway, let's get into it. Here we are up at West Coast Barbell, which is a VIP membership only gym. Very, very lucky to be here. In my opinion, pull-ups are one of the best exercises that you can possibly do. They're a compound exercise, working your back, working your biceps, and today I'm going to teach you how you can not just go about getting your first rep, but how you can go about repping them out like there's no tomorrow. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, you should know a couple of things. Number one is that the leaner you are, the less body fat you're carrying, the easier these are going to be. By the way, easier is probably the wrong word to describe it, but you know what I mean. And secondly, you should know the difference between different kinds of pull-ups. People often use the umbrella term of pull-up when actually there's three different main sort of variations. A pull-up is technically an overhand grip, there's a neutral grip chin-up, which is where your palms face each other, and then there's a chin-up, which is an underhand grip. Now, alongside the hand position, you can also start to look at different grip widths. Generally, the wider you go, the harder it's going to be. Reason being is that you're using less biceps and you've got less biceps to assist you. But for the sake of this video, I will try and keep it as simple as possible. Just before I get into it, make sure that you've watched the 5-step strategy for better results video, because this will give you a good idea of how you can split up your training for the best possible results. So here we have a sort of standard chin-up bar. You're going to see these in sort of most gyms. We've got the option of a neutral grip chin-up, so palms facing each other. We can do an underhand chin-up, so palms facing towards you. And then we've got also the option of pull-up, overhand. Again, the wider you go, the harder it's sort of generally going to be. Now, with that being said, in an ideal world, we would want to do a chin-up with a slightly closer grip than this. So a lot of the time, if you're doing chin-ups, it's almost better to use a straight bar that goes right the way across and doesn't have this gap. Reason being is that you can do a sort of shoulder width grip rather than this makes it a little bit more, can make it a little bit more sort of uncomfortable in the shoulders for some people. It's obviously very person dependent. Now, generally what I'll do with clients is I will get them to start with a neutral grip. That's generally where most people are going to feel strongest. Some people prefer it to start with an underhand grip and they do feel stronger with that grip. But I would say for most people, 80-90% of people, starting with a neutral grip is going to be best. Probably shoulder width apart, maybe a little bit closer is going to be ideal as well. Also, another thing that I would add is both pull-ups and chin-ups respond to training with high frequency. So if you can do these 2 times a week, then even better. As I said, make sure to flick back to the 5-step strategy for better results video, which will talk you through how you can split up your training to manage that. Now, when it comes to the actual chin-ups, we've got 3 main steps that I'll take someone through. Step 1, and this is often a test that I'll use to test sort of people's strength, to sort of gauge where they are, is called an isometric. Now, an isometric is just simply holding a set position. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring over a bench, because what we're going to do is we're going to jump to the top position. I'm going to try and hold that position for essentially as long as we can. This is going to give you a good idea of sort of how you find it, how the strength is at the top portion of that movement, because step 1 of the actual process is doing 3 to 4 sets of 3 to 5 reps of a 5 to 15 second hold at the top. And I'm going to walk you through what I mean. So what you want to do with this is you want to get some sort of bench where in an ideal world, your chin's starting above the bar. You're then just going to lift your feet and you're just going to try and hold this set top position. As I say, in an ideal world, 5 to 15 seconds is what we want to aim for, but all you're doing is holding that sort of top position, neutral grip, chin above the bar, and making sure that you're not shrugging up, making sure your shoulder blades are down and back. So as you can see, this is just a slight bit too low, so I've got to do a bit of a jump. Obviously, the lower it is, the more you've got to jump, and then it's a little bit harder because you've got to sort of steady your core. So we want to make sure chin's above the bar, and we're just holding this position, staying nice and strong, core tight, and holding that. That is going to be step 1, and as I say, 3 to 4 sets of 3 to 5 reps of anything between 5 and 15 seconds is going to be the goal. It might be that you start with 3 sets of 3 reps of 5-second holds, Gradually, you build those 3 sets of 3 reps up to 10 seconds, then you work up to 5 reps of 10 seconds, work towards 15, then potentially add a set. But just to give you a ballpark idea, 3 to 4 sets, 3 to 5 reps, 5 to 15 seconds is going to be the goal for that one. And as I said, the goal of the isometrics is to build strength at the top portion of that movement, and it's a really good test if you're unsure whether you can do chin-ups, just to go to that top position, hold it, see how long you can hold for, and that will give you a good idea of sort of strength and where you are. Once you've found that you're sort of nailed, you've got comfortable with that sort of isometric hold, and you're feeling strong in that top position, the next step is to move on to step 2, which is going to be eccentric chin-ups, eccentric pull-ups. Here, the goal is to build strength throughout the movement. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump to the top, we're going to do exactly the same thing as we did in step 1, but this time, rather than holding the top position, we're going to lower all the way down. Very similar to the isometrics, we want to be taking 5, but sort of between 5 and 10 seconds for 1 rep. So you're going right the way from the top, you're lowering all the way down, make sure your arms are totally straight at the bottom, don't get stuck here, and then drop down, make sure you get your arm all the way down. And here we're going to be doing 3 to 4 sets of 3 to 5 reps of sort of 5 to 10 seconds. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a demonstration, but my shoulder is a little bit sore. The things that I do for these videos. So what we want to do here is you want to jump to the top and then I'm just going to do it for 5 seconds because of my shoulder, but I'm going to go lower right the way down for 5 seconds. My feet are going to be tucked up behind me so they don't hit the ground and stop me. And you potentially can't see my feet at the bottom, but we want our arms totally straight. So jump to the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Down, and I would just repeat that. 3 reps, 5 reps, whatever it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. That is the eccentric chin-up. Now, if you can get to a point where you're doing 4 sets of 5 reps of 10, even 15 seconds lowering, you're going to be in a very good position to be able to move on to step 3. And step 3 is essentially just a progression on step 2, but it's just making it a little bit harder by adding pauses throughout the movement. So what we're going to do in step 3 is we're going to start at the top, but we're going to do a 3-step pause, which is going to mean that we're pausing at 3 points within that sort of lowering movement. So we're going to jump to the top, we're then going to pause at 1/4 of the way down, we're going to pause at halfway, so where your arms are at 90 degrees, and then you're going to pause at the bottom quarter, and then you're going to lower again. To start with, just pause for whatever you can, but really we want a good sort of 5 to 10 second pause at each of those steps. So again, if I'm to just demonstrate, I'm going to the top, and then lowering 1/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, halfway, 2, 3, 4, 5, bottom quarter, 2, 3, 4, 5, and down. Make sure your arms are straight at the bottom, feet down, and then repeat. And that is the 3-step isometric pause. Working up again to around 3 to 4 sets of 3 to 5 reps of a 5 to 10 second pause at each point is going to be what we want to be able to do. And if you can do that and you can nail those pauses and you get a good sort of length of time at each pause, then you'll probably find you're at a point where you can rep out a couple of chin-ups. And by the way, for those of you that don't know what a chin-up looks like, here's one here. 101, 102, 103. Oh yeah. There's a couple of other things I would look at. Making sure that you include lat pull downs in your program is going to be super important. Ideally in a grip similar in which you're trying to progress the chin up. So if you're trying to do chin ups, underhand grip, if you're trying to do pull ups, overhand grip, or if you're trying to do neutral grip, then neutral grip. As an example, this is going to be a neutral grip lat pull down. Getting a nice little pause at the bottom. And that's just going to help you build strength throughout that same movement pattern. Another thing that I see a lot in the gym is people using bands for chin-ups, and here is my thoughts. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with banded chin-ups. They are a good way of adding some assistance and increasing the amount of reps that you can do. The downside of the banded chin-up is that it gives you most assistance at the bottom of the exercise and least assistance at the top. And generally, people will find that they struggle with the top of the movement the most and trying to get that last bit where their chin comes over the bar. Now, if you think about the way that a band works, you get most assistance when you're at the bottom position, from here to here, And the higher you get, the less assistance you get. Meaning that when you get to that halfway point, you've got very little assistance to get to the top, which is the hardest part of the movement. Another thing that I see is people using bands that are far too heavy. So this one is actually quite heavy. You can see here, this is very, very light band, and this is a little bit lighter. So I would say these two are absolutely fine, but if you're at a point where you're having to use a band that is almost hard to stretch and hard to get your knee into, then you'd probably be better working on the isometrics, the eccentrics, and the 3-step pause eccentrics to build up your general strength levels. Although with that being said, band and chin-ups will help to add volume, so there's nothing wrong with throwing a few in. Another exercise that people like to add in is the assisted chin-up machine, and I don't necessarily mind this, but from experience it isn't going to be all that beneficial in improving your actual pull-up. Reason being, chin-ups are going to work a lot of your core, and if you've got your knees on the machine and that's helping to lift, it's going to help you build strength, but it's not necessarily going to help you build the actual chin-up movement. So as I say, it's a good exercise for being able to build strength, but not necessarily the best to build on the actual chin-up technique. And there you have it. That's a bit of a rundown on chin-ups, pull-ups, and how you can start to work towards achieving your first reps. Not to mention repping them out all day bloody long. Once you're in a position where you can do 3 reps, I'd be adding these in at the start of each upper body gym session, ideally a couple of times a week. And even if you get to a point where you can do 1 rep, try to work up to 3 sets of 3 to start. You could do 1 rep, rest 10 seconds, do another rep, rest 10 seconds, do another rep, and that would be 1 set, and repeat for the 3 sets. Initially you want to get to 3 sets of 3 and start to build reps from there. As I say, the chin up is probably the hardest bodyweight exercise there is, but follow this framework, be patient, and if you'd like to work together on a one-to-one basis to make it happen, then get in touch. See you next week.